Life. It is the act of simply existing. Now, life can be a good or bad experience for us, and that usually depends on our own actions. But sometimes, the very people that bring us into the world could be the cause of a horrible down spiral of life. An example of this is called neonatal abstinence syndrome. Now, in my survey, when it was asked if they had ever heard of neonatal abstinence syndrome, 77.7% of responders had not heard of it. Most of these reasons were because they had either never seen any sort of advertising promoting this problem, or that no one has ever brought it to their attention. Even though most people who took the survey had not heard of this problem, neonatal abstinence syndrome has become a growing problem over the last 10 years. So what is neonatal abstinence syndrome? Well, when mothers take drugs, let's take for example heroin, depending on the drug's route of entry, whether it be through injection, where the drug would immediately enter the bloodstream, or if it be oral, depending on whether the drug is acidic or basic. In this case, since heroin is overall acidic, it would end up being absorbed in the small intestine, and then into the bloodstream. Once the drug passes from the mother's bloodstream, it goes through the placenta to the fetus, where the drug is now exposed. These illicit substances, such as heroin, that cause drug dependence and addiction in the mother, also causes the fetus to become addicted as well. At birth, the baby's dependence on the substance continues. However, since the drug is no longer available, the baby's central nervous system becomes overstimulated, causing the symptoms of withdrawal. Symptoms of withdrawal consist of tremors, irritability, sleep problems, high-pitched crying, tight muscle tone, hyperactive reflexes, unstable temperature, and or vomiting and diarrhea, which can lead to dehydration. In order for these newborns to overcome neonatal abstinence syndrome, when addicted to heroin, they must ingest more calories and nutrients due to their increased activity, such as the tremors and hyperactive reflexes. An IV is also sometimes needed in the case of dehydration becoming too severe. Also, when certain infants show severe reactions to the absence of heroin, it becomes necessary for them to continue to be given the drug in smaller and smaller doses until the child doesn't need it anymore. But has the child really been cured? The answer would be no. Most people don't realize that being addicted to heroin or any drug before or during the pregnancy has already caused the genes of addiction of heroin to be passed on. What does this mean? See, genes have an inherited component, meaning it often runs in families so that it can be passed down from parent to child through the way of genes. Although scientists haven't just found one single addiction gene, like most other diseases, addiction vulnerability is a very complex trait. There are many factors, also known as mutagens, that will determine the likelihood of someone becoming an addict. Multiple lines of research show that addiction is influenced by genes. In fact, in order to come to this conclusion, many researchers have studied the multiple pedigrees of large families and try to find the genes that carry the addiction trait. Now, after hearing about the horror that neonatal abstinence syndrome, the most common question that is asked is, who would dare think of putting their child through this? Although anyone is capable of having their child suffer through neonatal abstinence syndrome, it is teenagers who are more likely to succumb to the addiction of heroin or any drug to the point where it is impossible for them to stop. According to research in 2015, about almost 60% of pregnant teenagers had confessed to taking one or more substances throughout their pregnancy. So what causes all these teenagers to succumb to drugs? The reasons why they are more prone to consuming drugs is of the following: peer pressure, modeling a parent's behavior, curiosity, boredom, and mere ignorance. This all proved to be true when 68% of responders admitted to peer pressure of drugs, and 83.2% confessed that they know someone, whether it be a family member, a friend, or both, who consumes drugs. So when push comes to shove, most responders also said that if they were ever to take drugs, it would be out of mere curiosity and/or boredom. Along with 83.3% of people who had been offered drugs were most popular in marijuana, which was 33.7%, and heroin at 22.8%, and even 12.7% who said that they had been offered all of the above. But is it really the fault of teenagers as to why their children suffer through neonatal abstinence syndrome when the drug is so easily available towards them? Recently, heroin has become a severe problem in Canada, which has now caused it to legalize heroin as a prescription drug. Since heroin is now so high in demand, it increases its production, which causes deforestation, soil erosion, habitat destruction, and flooding in Burma, China, just to grow poppy plants where the heroin can be made from. So have we as a society let down the future generations of human life by our selfishness to succumb to what we want? To the point where we ignore our unborn children because of the heroin's power to cloud our judgment? On average, it takes a newborn child 3 to 4 hours to show signs of neonatal abstinence syndrome, and 5 days to little over a week for their body, but most importantly, their central nervous system, to overcome the need for heroin. Now you, all of you, need to think before making a serious decision, because you never know who you might hurt in the end.